Hello and welcome back to Just Good Game News, the weekly place for all things positive in the gaming industry, whether that be breaking leaks and rumors, tips and tricks for the latest games, overlooked titles, old and new, or just a game spotlight on something that is brand new that I'm playing. What a time we're in at the minute. I feel like the industry has just tipped out the bucket of everything that's remaining for the rest of the year. And I know I'm currently playing literally Sonic Racing, Silent Hill F, Hades 2, all at the same time, trying to get through them. Ghost of Yote, will be out by the time a lot of you see this thing on YouTube, and then there's like Ball Pit and Ninja Gaiden 4, and just God, you cannot get round to every single thing. Mario Galaxy's remasters are out there as well. It's a glorious time, to be honest, and I'm not complaining. It's just hilarious that all these things seem to drop in one place at one time rather than scattering them across the summer when we could have done with them, because maybe we'd be able to get to more of those games. But let me know what you think down in the comments. What games are you actually managing to play? What are you prioritizing? What are you skipping over? Because I just hoover everything up, tax write-offs and all that. And I like to try and get to everything in time. But it is an absolutely ludicrous time. And I didn't even do an intro. I'm too excited. I am Scott Tilford. Welcome to the Just Good Game News, which is part of the Just Good Game Show. You can get over on Patreon. I'll throw an advert somewhere in this video explaining the rest of what goes on over on the patreon.com/Tilford. Because we have a lot of things to get to. And as much as this particular week in gaming is dogged by ridiculous negative stories, whether it's the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund teaming up with Silver Lake and different investors to take over EA and replace their employees with AI, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. So it's maybe more needed than ever to focus on the goods. So first up, the breaking Feelgoods, the breaking news that makes you feel good. I am a huge Prototype fan, and I think a lot of people are, to be honest. If you grew up playing Prototype / Infamous back in the superhero boom of the late 2000s, you probably picked a side. And as much as I love me some Infamous and I love me some Prototype, I always favored Prototype, maybe just because of the attitude that was in that game. It was very young me, if not slightly modern me. And Prototype is getting a remaster or potentially a remake, because over on the Steam version of the game, modder Nixon realized that the game had been updated to include new credits for the game that mentioned different staffers that work for Iron Galaxy, a studio that are known for remakes and remasters, as well as including in-progress builds of cut content and different parts of the original game that clearly weren't in there in the first place, leading Nixon to assume that this is for some other version of the game that had been pushed to Steam early or whatever. It lines up with a leak from back in April 2025 about a new Prototype game as well, where a user called Bigby talked to Insider Gaming and reported that they did a survey for a new Prototype game, where they were being asked loads of different questions about, which kind of abilities and features of the original Prototype did they enjoy, ascribing percentages to those totals and to those questions about what they would like the series to do going forward. Now, that assumedly back then was a new Prototype, but now that we have more information, it seems like it's actually a Prototype remake. If you don't know, Prototype was originally meant to be a Venom game. It was originally a Spider-Man Web of Shadows sequel. Oh my God, my voice. Hold on. Take a schlip. Now, if you don't know, Prototype was actually, back in the day, a Venom sequel. It was meant to be a sequel to Spider-Man Web of Shadows, which in itself is another, has become a cult classic entry in the Spider-Man game series. That game started out as a Venom title, but apparently they couldn't retain the rights or something as development continued. It's Radical Software. And over time, they just ended up doing their own thing. If you think about it through that Venom lens, a whole lot more of Alex Mercer's abilities in Prototype start to make sense, and the very symbiote-like nature of his overall design and the way he moves and the way that you can burst around the environments and fly around and ensnare enemies in tendrils and explode them and all that kind of good stuff. Imagine that with a Venom skin, and you'll pretty much have access to a Venom game for a good long while. But still, it managed to capitalize on the open world energy at the time and expand your traversal options and just how much you could be an absolute douche to all the NPCs and enemies around you. A really cool array of abilities, like cloning NPCs so you could enter different security encampments without being detected. You could eat anybody you wanted. You could sprint up the side of buildings and fly and glide. Really, 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 really cool game. And it was remastered in 2015. Activision did a double bundle thing back in 2015, Prototype 1 and 2. But they were barely remasters. They only ran at 1080p and 30 FPS. And, fine enough, you make the games available. But the price point always stayed sky high for some reason. And the actual work done to those games was very little anyway. So it always felt like there was more you could have done with Prototype. And, as I'm reporting this is already doing the rounds a little bit. And the general response online is, oh my God, more Prototype. So it feels like the hunger has always been there for this style of open world, anarchic, twisted superhero kind of game. And as much as Infamous has a lot of that groundswell energy in terms of how much Sony tend to, refer to their past titles, Prototype, I would say, was always a more fun game overall and let you do more stuff in an open world. So here's to whatever the hell this thing actually is. Before I go any further, I'm going to have to plug some stuff over on the patreon.com/Tailford. You can get access to the Just Good Game Show early, ad-free, on a special RSS feed. I've reduced the tiers down, so now we have the Helping Hand donation tier at £3 a month. You can get early access, like I said, to the Just Good Game Show for £5 a month, as well as a Patreon-exclusive podcast called The Man Who Stares at Goats, which is just an excuse to revisit the greatest games of all time. Every single month, you can play along, you can submit your own talking points and questions, etc. around those games, and we just celebrate something every single month. But if you would like the full version of the Just Good Game experience, that is the Just Good Game Show, as the news itself is taken from that show. You can access the whole thing, like I said, over on Patreon, over on your podcast feed of choice. Next up, another Lord of the Rings game. This also comes from Insider Gaming, talking to various sources about a new third-person action game based in the Lord of the Rings universe, which is still apparently at the very nascent stages of development. It's just starting to come together, and it's not from Warner Brothers. It's actually from a weird consortium of different publishers and teams that include Embracer, Revenge, and Insider Gaming just says other studios, but they mention that multiple parties are involved trying to bring the game together. They note that obviously Embracer now owns Lord of the Rings, but in terms of the way that they've handled the IP, we've had Lord of the Rings Gollum, which didn't go down very well. Tales of the Shire from last month was the most open goal, cozy game you could possibly make, and then it was incredibly threadbare and just didn't really land very well at all. My wife was very upset with that game for being incredibly empty, and I feel like even things like the Mines of Moria game, fine enough, but it's nowhere near the hype that was surrounding Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War. And obviously, both those games were published by Warner Brothers. There's different fractions of the Lord of the Rings IP that are owned by different studios, and obviously you've got different spin-offs that are then owned by different teams. But this being a third-person action game does line it up, at least in my eyes, a little bit more with something like the Shadow series. And it's the only other thing that's mentioned in the report is that the game is being designed to compete with Hogwarts Legacy, which is a really interesting turn of phrase, because I feel like Hogwarts Legacy is known for being, well, gameplay-wise, a little bit more physics-based and a little bit more explorative. Obviously, it's massively sold on being associated with Harry Potter and letting you explore Hogwarts as whichever way you would want to. I'm very much not a Harry Potter guy, so I was always more of a Lord of the Rings guy. So I wonder if they're doing something where you're playing as a custom character and then being able to go explore the Shire and explore, whatever, like all the different the different fields and everything else that connects all the different landscapes. A little bit like the Lego Lord of the Rings game did. Like, for as much as it's just a Lego game or whatever, the Lego Lord of the Rings game is a full-on open space where you can literally just do the entire walk in semi-real time that Frodo and Sam did, going from the Shire to Mount Doom. It's really cool. It's a minimized version overall. It's not you're not gonna be walking for years to get it done. But still, that's a really cool idea in a game. So I wonder if that's what they're getting at in terms of how else would you compete with Hogwarts Legacy if you're not connoting the open world exploration, faithful kind of to the IP vibe that game has. So we'll see, but at least we're getting more Lord of the Rings stuff at some point anyway. Lastly, another remake, as we seem to live in the era of remakes, and Halo is being remade yet again, at least according to Rebs Gaming, who is a very reputable investigator, already did various reports. If you go check out Rebs Gaming on YouTube, they do some great stuff, talking to various team members about the development of Halo Infinite. That report came out last year. It was very, very illuminating as to just how completely mishandled the development of that game was, and how much the executives threw out various ideas that the team were putting together across Infinite's development. However, they do have a new report about a remake of Halo with a lot more changes to it than just what happened in the Master Chief Collection, the Combat Evolved remaster, the version that lets you click the stick in and change between old graphics and new. They do note that a developer who was part of the Master Chief Collection is helping with this, and then they have additional details as well as to what else is going to be moved around in regards to gameplay. One of the big things is that certain levels will be redesigned. The library is mentioned as being changed to make it less repetitive. The remake itself will be a mix of Unreal Engine 5 and Halo's own Blam engine. It's noted that the latter will still handle the guts of the game's physics and systems, while Unreal will improve graphical fidelity and rendering on top. This in-development build has apparently been given the sprint ability, which is a very divisive inclusion to Halo ever since Halo 4. And that whole thing of like, how do you go back to Halo? What do you change? What do you improve? Can you still make it land in the way that it used to? And can you get new people back in? The whole way the Halo's been handled, let's stay optimistic, because it is one of my favorite franchises overall. But I feel like the way that it's been handled across the last few years has been a lot of back and forth. Although if you go into Rebs Gaming's reports, a lot of that just comes from the top down. It's not from any want. The willpower that was lost on behalf of the developers and the creatives is absolutely from the top down. I've seen various people citing some old tweets from Marcus Leto, one of the original creators of Halo and instrumental into Halo's entire run, saying he was responding to Ryan McCaffrey on IGN, where there was rumors of the Halo remake a good few months ago, and Ryan McCaffrey got out there and said, what's the point? We already have the Combat Evolved Deluxe Edition or whatever you call the original remake. What could they possibly do? And then Leto replied to that and said, well, you never know, maybe it's all about implementing new mechanics that feel more contemporary, but don't get away from the series, the actual feel of Halo in itself, which maybe that dude knows more than he was originally letting on. And so, would you even want a version of Halo that, is in its guts the original title, but adds things like the sprint, maybe adds some of the physics models from Halo Infinite? The last part of this comes from 343 Studios / Halo Studios, as they're now known, announcing that they'll have various things to talk about at the Halo World Championships at the end of October, which, you can connect the dots and assume that because this information is finally coming out, maybe we're about to get an official announcement as to this project as well. The last part of Reb's report, and it's just he ends the video on this, just saying a tantalizing little thing to talk about, assuming he's going to have more information on it going forward, is, and this might be divisive to some people in the audience, a live service, long-term multiplayer Halo spin-off. It seems like Halo Studios want to separate Halo and have this sort of Halo platform that they would then carry forward, which feels like the most obvious thing in the world, to be honest. I mean, the way that Halo Infinite was handled felt like it focused a lot more on its multiplayer. Obviously, the Halo Master Chief Collection that has had, instrumental, a huge amount of stuff added to its multiplayer sphere, which has been instrumental to keeping that game going for so long. And it makes sense that you just have a free-to-play, live service implemented Halo game that is just called Halo, and you just, bulk that thing out, unify the platforms, bring together all the different content drops from Infinite and from Master Chief Collection, have one unified audience, one place to go, keep the servers stable for the love of God, and just keep that thing going. Next up, the game Spotlight, and oh my god, what a grab the multiple spotlights, shine them all on Sonic Racing Crossworlds. What a game, what a fantastic time I have had. God, I've been playing it every day. That thing just hits, man. That thing hits like words you can't say on YouTube. But just what an exemplary, kart racer, but also just an outstanding title. Like, it's so perfectly tuned, and it makes sense. Like, I was reading about how the behind the scenes they changed the development teams around. This is actually Sonic Team. It's not the dudes that did Sonic Team Racing. I actually forget their team name, studio name. But since I feel like Sonic Team have been on a bit of a run, like, ever since they got more funding from Sega, because Sonic was never a huge deal in Japan. Like, that's the takeaway thing. If you look at Sega history, Sonic history, it was always a way bigger deal in the West, which is, he was entirely designed to bring in Western audiences. And for that reason, he never really took off in the East. He never really, was a big deal in Japan. Nowhere near as big as Mario, Nintendo, etc. But Sonic Frontiers was a huge, huge win. And that apparently turned the executive heads over at Sega to be like, maybe we should invest a little bit more in Sonic. And obviously, the Sonic movies have done really, really well. Sonic 3 is banging, to be honest. I'm a big Sonic fan, as you can tell. And Sonic Racing Crossworlds feels like the culmination of everything that Sonic Side series has been building towards. And it's outstanding that it is reviewed better than Mario Kart World. And I would easily say it's better, not just from, discarding the fan side of things. I do think Mario Kart World is a little bit too threadbare, especially in regards to the open world aspects that it was largely sold on. I talked about this last week. But Sonic Racing Crossworlds is just so exemplary put together. Great physics model great customization in regards to the carts themselves, different ways you can outfit your cart and character. With all these different multifaceted builds, like you can choose to invest in all these different multipliers in regards to your boost. You can turn your drift into an attack when you're going around a corner. You can change all the different power-ups that you start with. You can tweak the carts, focus on acceleration or speed or boost or power or whatever. And then you have the presentation itself, like the music that is pulling from all these different games, all these different eras of Sonic that are sort of known by different generations, largely, and Sonic generations as well, largely as failures. We haven't brought anything in from Sonic 2006. We're not going crazy, but Sonic Boom is sorry, not Sonic Boom. The Sonic Prime on Netflix is one of the pre-order bonuses, as well as the Werehog from Sonic Unleashed. And it's very Star Wars prequel energy, where like they've just kind of been reappreciated over time. You have a bunch of kids and teens that grew up with these other entries in the Sonic franchise, the 3D era, who have those soft spots. And somehow Sega are able to land the plane in Sonic Racing Crossworlds and just bring everything together. Like, the core thing with the game is that you are warping between different tracks per lap. So, the game will load up the next section of track that whoever's in first place then chooses. You go to a different part on the track, you can choose what you want to beam into next, which is a great mechanic. And you can look through the portal and see what you're about to drive into. It's like a low-res version that then, pops and becomes like 4K or whatever if you're playing on PS5, which I am. It's just a really cool idea, and it lets them, play with the music, the iconography, and all the recognizable elements of all those different eras all at once. So you're going from, one lap in like a 3D version of a Green Hill themed arena, beaming into one of the first level of Sonic Unleashed or whatever it is, and it just kind of works. Like you've got all the villains from Sonic Lost World in here as well. It's kind of crazy just how much charm there is in here. You have a rival system in here, so you have all these custom back and forths at the start of each match.
The doctor's daughter? Perhaps if you put more care into your construction, you'd provide more of a challenge.
I am the culmination of Dr. Eggman's genius. You are a relic of 50 years ago.
And there are loads of different game modes involving boosting off an enemy or boosting off a teammate to either do damage or get ahead. You can work as teams if you go into some of the side modes outside of the Grand Prix. But even when you finish the Grand Prix, you unlock a whole different friendship system where you're putting the different ticket currency into becoming friends with these different characters. And that leads to different things as well. I'm going to talk about it in the tips and tricks section of the show. But I'm really blown away by it. And it's not just, like I said, I'm a Sonic fan in like that ironic way that many older Sonic fans are, where it's like, yeah, we know it was terrible for a long time, but it's good fun. I can't knock the quality, like genuinely, you cannot knock the quality of just how well this thing plays. And I think the demo that they put out does a bit of a disservice to how satisfying it is unlocking all the customization elements and going back into another race, trying out the wider roster as I punch my microphone. And just getting used to all the different ways that you can compete in the game, just how addictive it is to play and how challenging it is as well. Like Mario Kart World, I find to be extremely easy. I was winning straight away. I won my first cup, not to brag, but still, I'm going into Sonic Racing Crossworlds, and I put that on the hardest difficulty, the Supersonic difficulty, and I came in third. I came in fifth, and it's good. It feels good. I want to get back in there. I want to learn the different ways to get ahead, and I just like that. I think it's good to have those options in there. You can knock the difficulty down. You'll start winning again, you can get better, you go higher, you unlock different abilities, you go into the time trials with your newly acquired boost mode, and every time you beat one of the time trials, it gives you a different song from Sonic eras past, as well as various remixes and stuff as well. I love this thing, and I will move on, but it's some of the most effusive praise that I've had to give to a game, mainly because of that combined element of the IP just being all over the place, the developers having gone through so many weird times in regards to, how much does our parent company, how much does Sega even believe in Sonic Team over in Japan, and, what can we do with the IP? And it turns out that by just steering into all the mistakes you made across the last 20-odd years, there's enough charm in there somehow, alongside all the new fans that are coming in, alongside the movies and all that kind of stuff, again, to somehow bring it together and make it work. There's a proficiency here and a charm and a technical execution that not in a million years that I think I will be saying that about a Sonic racing game, but it's pretty damn good. Next up, the overlooked games of the week. Now, these can be new or old, whatever you want to shout out down in the comments on YouTube, or go to the overlooked games section of the Discord and shout some stuff out over on there as well. I'm going to start with my pick, though, which is RoboCop Rogue City Unfinished Business, something that came out earlier this year and I thought was a DLC. Now, RoboCop Rogue City from last year is a surprisingly stellar title. That in itself is a massively overlooked game. Really cool first-person shooter, which massively embodies, being RoboCop. You move nice and slow, chunky. It feels like you're a walking tank. You can pick up NPCs and fling them across the environments. It's just a super gory, good time, mixed with some really good writing and a psychological breakdown of what it means to be Alex Murphy as RoboCop. Like every couple of levels, you have to complete a psychological evaluation with a professional. So you're answering all these questions about how much of a human or how much of a machine you've become, which is core to obviously the RoboCop IP. But when Unfinished Business came out earlier this year, that to me was framed like a DLC. It was, it is fundamentally a side story, but it is also a sequel. They ended up putting it out as more of a sequel. It's not really sold as a DLC, and so I was always biding my time getting to it. And then eventually I checked it out the other day, and obviously it's more of the same stellar gameplay that was in Rogue City, but it's just such a great game to recommend anyway. And the setup is pure Dread, like 2013's Dread, the movie Dread, where you're just in this big tower block that is full of all these different gangsters and people trying to live their lives and everything else, and you're just working your way up floor by floor, taking out all these different people, finding out all the sort of interpolitical workings of the different factions that are held up in this big, ridiculous Mega One style skyscraper. It's just awesome. And so like I'm rolling this together as a recommendation for the RoboCop game anyway, but also Unfinished Business. I think as a combo, they're super solid. And this gameplay wise, like I said, it's just so satisfying. You can rip off parts of the environment with your super strength. You can grab a radiator off the wall and brain a guy with it, or you can rip a turret off the ground and start using that as you mow everybody down in slow motion. It's just super stellar, and it reminds me of an era of first-person shooters, or an era of gaming. I mentioned how much I love slow motion stuff. It reminds me how much that stuff used to be more of a thing in the 360 shooter era, and I'm glad to see it back. So shout out to both of the RoboCop titles that have come out across the last few years. Developers Teon are absolutely flying. Next up, Symbolic 503 in the YouTube comments recommends Jet Set Radio. It says, "Do you remember Jet Set Radio?" And asks what do I think about the ongoing stuff with Sega. They're rebooting Jet Set Radio alongside various other Sega classics like Crazy Taxi and Golden Axe, and Shinobi just came out, which is exemplary in itself. If you go back a few weeks on the Just Good Game News, I did a whole segment on Shinobi because that thing is outstanding. I needed a thesaurus to look up more words for outstanding and stellar and phenomenal. But yeah, man, Jet Set Radio is awesome. I feel like it was formative to a lot of people growing up as to their music taste and style and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's absolutely a place for Jet Set Radio to exist in the modern day. It's awesome seeing Team Reptile, do Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, which, it was in itself this sort of spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio. They got the same composer along to do more old school style Sega music for that game. And Bomb Rush is great. I think came out like 2 or 3 years ago. Would massively recommend it. It runs beautifully on Switch as well if you want a handheld Jet Set game right now and you don't want to wait for Sega. And they just announced their new game. I think it's called Hyperfunk, which, is them continuing down that road. It's a great road to go down. And yeah, man, I think this stuff is just super recommendable. You take the core idea of a trick system video game, something like a Tony Hawk's, an aggressive inline, a Dave Mirror, and then blow it all the way out, and have a really great, graphical presentation, get the cell shading stuff back in there, and then back that with really good thumping tunes. There's absolutely a place for that. Insane Monk 11 recommends Secret of Evermore and Sandland, 2 titles that I've not got to yet. Although I did play a lot of the demo for Sandland, it being, I guess, the last Akira Toriyama adaptation that he was involved with at any degree before sadly he passed away. Toriyama being an absolute, not that people don't know, an absolute legend in anime and manga, creator of Dragon Ball, etc. I love the art style though for Sandland, and it seems like Namco Bandai, shout out to Matt McMuscles, did an absolutely stellar job with bulking out the world of Sandland, the different vehicles that you can get, the combat systems and everything else. I played a ton of that demo. I remember thinking like they're giving you a lot, which I guess is just a way of incentivizing you to cross over to to the full release. But Secret of Evermore, I sadly haven't played, but I'll shout that out and put some footage on screen on the YouTube so people can see it. Because all those things, I always try and say something along if I've played the game that people recommend. But I'm also excited when someone mentions something that I remember the name of, but I haven't actually played. So shout out to Secret of Evermore alongside Sandland. Last community recommendation comes from MattBall8622, who recommends Skies of Arcadia. This is one of those titles that I played at a friend's house, the classic where you go in, they're just playing something, it's like, hey, sit down, you've got to see this. Like a Mean Girls style, but not shopping. This was just dropped in like 2000 or something. I remember just being blown away by the general presentation. Even though it sits in that sort of side JRPG sphere, like to me, it's alongside the Grandias, the Legaias, that kind of stuff. It didn't have the budget of a Final Fantasy. It wasn't as completely mind-blowing as watching something like Final Fantasy VIII in motion back in the day, or Final Fantasy IX or whatever. The first time you saw that game in motion, it was like, am I actually controlling this? It looks real. But the combat system, the presentation, the general sense of whimsy and mysticism and everything else, what you want from a JRPG is absolutely in Skies of Arcadia. And as Mattball mentions, it was only on GameCube and Dreamcast, which they say kind of hurt its wider distribution. I played it a little bit on GameCube. I watched my friend play it on GameCube. So yeah, it's one of those titles that you would hope that Nintendo Switch Online, like Nintendo themselves, get around to putting it on Switch Online now that they are bulking out the GameCube library. At the minute, they seem intent on fleshing out the Game Boy Advance stuff. Like they just put a new Klonoa game on there, and another Mr. Driller game, and it's like, lads, put some GameCube games on there. Like I know you've got 5 on there already, but we could do with things like this on there as well. Next up, 3 game deals and 3 game deals, if you know what I'm saying, and someday I might retire this if it keeps confusing people. Now, all 3 of these are from PlayStation this week, mainly because as I looked across the eShop and on the Xbox store, a lot of the stuff that I mentioned last week, a lot of the selections were largely the same. Sony have had a turnover though, and they have a whole bunch of stuff available until the 8th of October. So all 3 of these games are on the same little chunk of deals, the same availability window. Starting with though, $6.99 for Pray for the Gods. Oh, it's $4.99, not $6.99. What a fool I am until the 8th of October. A really, really cool game, a Shadow of the Colossus-like. They came out a few years ago. I feel like I was one of the only people who played it. I convinced Josh to do a video with me back at What Culture. And I forget what the hell we even called it. Something like the most overlooked game of 2023 or something like that. Because this has Shadow of the Colossus style gameplay where you're clambering up all these giants to bring them down. But it brings in some of the cool, more modern mechanics like a grappling hook, some survival aspects in there in terms of the crafting and being able to rest at different bonfires and campfires to get from place to place as you explore the environment. I just thought it was a cool game. Like I thought it was the idea of taking Shadow of the Colossus and then adding, like newer elements in terms of the traversal and everything. The Shadow of the Colossus setup is something that more studios should have done something with anyway. There's not that many titles, hardly anything I can really think of. Things like Monster Hunter kind of channel it, but obviously the timeline Monster Hunter predates it anyway. But still, that idea of taking on these hulking giant creatures that double as platforming challenges and combat gauntlets in themselves, that in itself is really cool. The name for this had to be changed. There was a whole legal dispute around the original spelling. That's why it's Praey for the gods. But I just think it's awesome. And, it's obviously a bit of a mid-tier budget title, but, for this price tag, it's absolutely worth it. And I'll throw some gameplay up. I just want to recommend this title. So, yeah, man, pray for the gods. Pray for people discovering this game. The next game down on this deal is $6.99 for Darksiders Genesis. Now, I'll not rabbit on about Darksiders too much because I've talked about it a lot. I talked about it a few weeks ago when Darksiders 4 got announced. But Genesis is a really great side story, really great spin-off to the main games. You've got the 3 numbered games that play more like over-the-shoulder action games. They all have different flavors to them in terms of other genres that they're pulling from. And then Genesis is a more top-down Diablo-like, which is more encouraged that you play it with a friend, like in person. You can play it online, but it's definitely a local co-op dream. Plays super, super well. It's by Gunfire Games, who carried on the IP after the main developers stopped. And you play as War and Strife. So you have a melee-focused character and a gun, like a firearm-based character, and the combos you can do together are great. Just the level of animation here is really, really great. And Joe Madureira's art style, who is the helm, the guy that directs, the direction of Darksiders overall, all of his artwork is always exemplary. And the different NPCs, the characters, the people you talk to, the quest givers, and the story itself is all presented so well. Like, I love me some Darksiders. I've talked about it a lot, and I'm really looking forward to Darksiders 4. But Genesis is just super tight, and I would totally recommend it on a pure gameplay level. The lore side of things is good fun. As always with Darksiders, everything takes place in the past. You're forever building back up to Darksiders 1, but you don't necessarily need to worry about that stuff. Genesis is just a fun excuse for some top-down dungeon crawling with, great upgrades. Like I said, stellar animation in terms of doing different finishing moves on enemies and working together to unleash all these spectacular-looking moves that just fill the screen. Lastly on this sale is The Evil Within, Shinji Mikame's kind of forgotten series at this point, which, he broke away from Capcom, Shinji Mikami being the mastermind behind various Capcom titles, but also, Devil May Cry, but big old deal when it came to Resident Evil 4. You wouldn't have the original RE4 without Shinji Mikami. I love The Evil Within as this sort of extension of Resident Evil 4's core gameplay. If you like this, the way the original RE4 plays, go with this. Like, there's a bit of a homage to RE4 at the very beginning of Evil Within as well, in regards to like this mist-caked village that you're moving your way through. But the overall setup is way more Matrixy and is way more, messing with people's minds and getting lost in psychologies and psyches and like what's actually real and what's happening and everything. And both Evil Within games are great. Like, they're both really great. Evil Within 2 isn't on sale, but Evil Within 2 would introduce open world horror, like semi-open world spaces where you don't fully know if you're safe going down an alleyway or around a corner, or something jumps out of a door at you as you're trying to explore. Really great ideas in this series. But yeah, Evil Within 1 I would still totally recommend. There's some awesome DLC for it, but the main story is absolutely worth playing. Next up, tips and tricks for my beloved Sonic Racing Crossworlds, which I just feels like the game that everyone's playing right now as we wait for something like a Ghost of Yote or whatever. But just a couple of simple things that I want to point out. One is that Sonic Racing's version, there's a whole thing in Mario Kart, going back a good few games in Mario Kart, but where if you want to finesse a drift as you fly around the corner, maybe you find yourself starting to go a little bit too wide. On Mario Kart, you're already holding X, you're already holding B, sorry. You would then kind of finesse the brake whilst holding accelerate. It was like a bit of a thumb technique that you could bring into Mario Kart. Sonic Racing's version of this in Crossworlds, because you're drifting on the right trigger, and you're probably already holding X on PlayStation or B or whatever, the bottom face button to accelerate. You can let go of accelerate whilst also keeping a hold of the drift. It feels a bit weird cognitively to figure that out, because you don't want to stop drifting, but you do want to lay off the accelerate. That will let you fine-tune the drifts themselves. I know it sounds really simple, but it's just worth pointing out. When I started playing, I was like, there has to be a way to finesse the drift, and I was pushing the left trigger trying to like brake as I was going around. It wasn't helping. You lose rings as you bounce into the parts of the course, unless you equip the gadget that means that you keep your rings. And so keep this in mind. It'll save you in the time trials. It'll save you in some of the snakier courses. It's just something to keep in mind as you get better at Sonic Racing, because the skill ceiling is pretty high in this game, especially when you start playing online. My other tip for Sonic Racing is customization based, because the game's customization system is really cool, and you can get a whole bunch of different vinyls. There's a weird amount of third-party tie-in stuff, where I don't know if this was like a budgetary thing, where Sega just did a bunch of deals with like Samsung and Don Quixote, like the Japanese convenience store chain, because you can put their logos on your carts, which is just, I don't even know why that stuff is in there. But shout out to Don Quixote. It was really fun seeing one of them in real life after visiting them for so long in Yakuza. Anyway, all the vinyls that you get, the decals that you get, are cool enough, but the better ones that you get, you won't get access to until you have one cup in each of the Grand Prix races, and then you'll unlock the friendship system in the game, which means that all the Donpa tickets that you are already building up, the ones that you're using to buy customization parts, you then put them into specific characters, and then you unlock better customization options for your carts. This is how you get the really over-the-top decals that you might have started to see online, that are more character-based. It's worth putting the time in to max out the Grand Prix stuff stuff. Just if you need to, knock the difficulty down, get through it on the middle difficulty, unlock the better decals, and then wipe out all the stuff on the supersonic difficulty in the best looking car possible. Lastly, some trivia. I love sending you off into the weekend with a lovely little bit of trivia. And because Hades 2 is out, and that game, I'm going back and forward on it. Mostly I'm going forward on it. It's just that it's just hard. But I just have to embrace how hard it is. But Hades 2 coming out reminded me of all the conversations around Hades 1. And that idea that Hades 1 had one of the biggest scripts in gaming history. And so I started looking into what are the biggest scripts in gaming history. And turns out Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 from just this year is in contention for being the biggest script in gaming history with 2.2 million words to its name. That's apparently under investigation in a good way from the Guinness World Record company because they have to verify it before they announce it to the world, which would mean the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 would knock Baldur's Gate 3 off the top spot. Baldur's Gate 3 currently has the literal world record for the biggest script in gaming history at 2 million words. So maybe GTA 6 will come along in 2026 and just knock both of them out the way as well. But for now, it's worth mentioning that, yeah, Kingdom Come 2 might be the biggest, verbally, the biggest game that we have. And in regards to Hades, that had 300,000 words and 2,100 voiced lines of dialogue. No, 21,000 voiced lines of dialogue. Which is what started the conversation in the first place. If you play the original Hades or Hades 2, it feels like every single person you're talking to has original dialogue every single time you interact with them, which is truly a massive feat. Supergiant Games, just what an outstanding run. Like, you know, from Bastion to Transistor to Pyre to Hades, like just, they have not put a foot wrong. They've only gotten bigger and better and more artistically infused every single time. And I love that all their writers and developers, or a lot of them, are voices in the game as well. Like Greg Kasavin is, and Logan Cunningham, who, you know, became a big deal by being the voiceover in the original Bastion, and he's the sword in Transistor, is now Hades in both Hades games. So just awesome, man. Just shout out to all the script writers, the people putting these games together, and here are your flowers for putting together millions of words for the rest of us to enjoy. And that has been episode 9 of the Just Good Game News. Please head over to patreon.com/Tilford if you would like the bigger Just Good Game show, which is what this is taken from. You can get access to that early ad-free every single week, and you can dive on the Discord and submit different talking points for me to get stuck into for the community portion of the show as well. But yeah, man, thank you so much for listening and for watching, and shout out which games you're looking forward to or what you're struggling to keep up with right now, because I feel like I'm drowning in the best possible way, and collectively we can all get through this stuff. Also, I'll mention that I have some merchandise coming soon. I've just ordered a whole bunch of samples, so I'll be putting a video together for that. But check out the other videos on the channel, see what you think of the different games that I've been highlighting. We've been doing some Let's Plays for Skate, for Baby Steps, for Wonder Stars. All that stuff is on the channel, as well as all the previous episodes of the Just Good Game News. You might find some deals in there that will save you some money. You might also find some different breaking news and leaks about upcoming games that you didn't know about, like the Venom game that is hopefully coming out in the next couple of years. But once again, thank you all so much for checking out the show. Hopefully I'll see you over on the Patreon or the Discord, and if not, I will see you next week. Goodbye. It's the end of the show, you know, just nice little chill time. Basically, I want to shout out all the helping heroes on Patreon's top tier, and I'm going to do it in a couple of different ways going forward. Last week, I animated a thing. I say as if it was like a big deal or anything. I barely know animation at all, but I had fun picking some Sonic theme songs and putting some rings on the end as all your names popped up, and I thought, well, I could do that every week, or I might just see what comes to mind every week, and I thought, why not do a chill one? I'm chilling right now. And so I've got a different background lighting, and I want to shout everybody out. So everybody who is currently on the Helping Hero tier, and it's funny because the only way I can record this without going back and forward to my laptop is I've got a bit of the old picture-in-picture on my phone, which it just needs must. I'm recording the gameplay videos on the floor in the living room, and I'm recording everything else with the phone. But until I get a teleprompter, that's the way it's going to go. So huge shout outs to Evil Wabbit, Hunter Ferguson, Noel, James Payne, Nova John, Nathan Ellis, Ray Montano, Alex Semenchuk, Soul, Robert Main Prize, Habit, King Muttley, and VK's Game Time. A huge thank you to all of you. Obviously, I could not do this without you, and I massively appreciate so many of you either coming on board at the top tier or upgrading your memberships over time. Hopefully, you're enjoying everything that's on the Patreon overall. And now we're into October. In a few weeks' time, we'll have the first episode of The Man Who Stares as a goat, which will be Metal Gear Solid if you haven't seen that on the Discord announcement. So if you want to play along, get yourself a copy of Metal Gear Solid, play that game. You can leave your comments, your thoughts on the Discord channel. It's called Greatest of All Time. It's available to everybody. And on October 27th, which I think is a Monday, I will sit down and talk about Metal Gear Solid. I'm going back through it this month as well, and I haven't done that for a good few years, so we'll see what happens. But for now, thank you so much. Hopefully I'll see you over on the Discord, and if not, I will see you next week. Goodbye.